Jonah Tong, when he first got called up, looked like he was going to be the next stud for the New York Mets, and obviously since then has had some struggles, most recently not getting out of the first inning in his last outing. In this video, I'm going to break down his mechanics, his pitch mix, and what I think he needs to do in order to be an absolute stud in the big leagues. But as always, remember this kid is 22 years old and has a very bright future ahead of him. The first thing to go into when any pitcher is struggling, whether that's in the big leagues, minor leagues, or youth baseball, is their mechanics. To see whether there's anything that they're doing throughout their delivery that could be messing up pitch location, tipping pitches, or anything like that. So let's dive into Jonah Tong's mechanics. The first thing I love about his delivery is the rhythm to start. He's a really good rhythm getting into leg lift, and it really sets up his drift phase in the delivery. So his drift is exceptional here. So the first thing I'm not a huge fan of is a stabby arm action. So if you watch when Jonah Tong goes through this stab that he has at the beginning, it's almost like a pause in his delivery. A lot of, like CC Sabathia was a big guy who did it. I'm personally just not a fan of it. I think it can lead to some issues. Obviously, CC's a Hall of Famer, and he knows a lot more than I do. But I'm not a huge fan of the stabby arm action. I think it can actually lead to some issues down the line, especially with late arm action and some elbow problems. So that's the first thing I'm not a huge fan of when it comes to Jonah Tong's delivery. But the thing that makes this kid exceptional is his spinal extension. So if we watch here getting into flip up, this is unbelievable. His spinal extension to be able to create velocity from this spot is incredible. Now, this could also be why he's having some issues, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But the thing that's also super impressive about him is being able to keep his hips closed while his front foot is clearly so far open. So the front foot is obviously pointing not towards home plate, it's almost pointing towards essentially the first base dugout. But his hips are still closed. Right, he's not pulling off, which is, I don't know if I've ever seen anyone be able to do this, to be able to have this front foot so far open while keeping the hips closed and really having this insane spinal extension. He creates velocity from his spine. That's really how everyone creates velocity differently, but Jonah Tong here, this is really where he's creating this velocity from. This is to be able to keep his hips in line towards home plate, to have these hips really in line towards home plate while everything else is bowing out towards first base is really impressive. But this is where I think that he's running into some issues. So the first thing I see is obviously all of his momentum from his torso and his front foot are all leaning towards first base, and his hips and his arm are going towards home plate. This is where he's running into some real problems. This is obviously his release here, and this is where his face and head are pulling away. So there's two things that's happening here. One, he's not even looking at home plate. As you can see, his eyes are starting to dart off this way. So that's the first problem. The second thing is the distance between his arm and his head is a lot. So that's where we run into arm problems, when our head starts to peel away from the arm. So this is twofold problem. One, he's not looking at a target. And two, we have a big gap here. So that's a real problem. Now when we go through the rest of his delivery, he picks up the target, obviously, after release, which is not ideal, but his lead leg is exceptional. So what happened there, that jump in his front foot, it's called a paw back, right? So that is something you look for in runners. If you look at like Usain Bolt or guys like that, guys, when they hit the ground, their foot paws back. So this is showing that his front leg is super efficient and super powerful. Again, this kid throws 98 miles an hour at 22 years old. So he knows how to throw hard. The issue that he's dealing with right now is obviously he's getting hit around a little bit, and his strike percentage is well down. But this is the problem. If you could literally fix one thing in his delivery, it's just making sure that he's not pulling off so hard with his head, but it's really coming from what makes him elite is his spinal extension and being able to keep his hips closed as his spine starts to torque around his pelvis and around his torso. This is where his velocity comes from. This is what makes him so elite. From a mechanical standpoint, what needs to change here is just being locked on the target for longer and not pulling off so hard in his delivery. As I said, it's going to be difficult for him because of the way he lands and the way he creates velocity. But that's the biggest thing for him to fix mechanically in order to be in the zone more consistently and not miss his spots the way he has been. He's been missing over the crosshairs of the plate, in the middle of the plate, pretty consistently, and big leaguers do not miss those pitches. Now this brings us to our next issue within his pitching in general, is his pitch usage here. The problem with his pitch usage here is how much he's using his four-seam fastball. I'm not a huge fan of overusing your fastball, even though his fastball is a really good velo, obviously 72nd percentile, and his extension is what makes him elite. Obviously he's not 6'9" or anything like that, but his extension is incredible. But then when you look at his next highest usage pitches, his changeup at 29%. He's really a two-pitch pitcher when you really look at these two pitches. He's not using his curveball very much, and his slider is almost non-existent. That's a huge problem. Huge problem. He's really a two-pitch pitcher at the big league level and relying heavily on his fastball. Hitters at the big league level do not miss fastballs. Fastballs have the highest expected batting average against and the highest expected exit velocity against. So this right here is a real problem for him. We need to really incorporate his other two pitches and not be so heavy on just the fastball changeup. You can be very effective. As I've mentioned earlier in this video, CC Sabathia built a whole career on being a fastball changeup pitcher, but he did have other pitches and he did use them. This is a problem. He needs to decrease his fastball usage percentage. And the reason that this is on the higher end at the moment for him is because in his last outing, he was falling behind in counts a lot, 3-0, 3-1, 2-1, and having to throw a 3-0 heater or a 3-1 heater just so he didn't walk the next guy. So this number's a little inflated because of the situation he put himself in, but this is the second issue that he's having, is this pitch usage percentage here. 3% on his slider is just way too low. Like, we need to use these other two pitches more for him to be effective at the big league level. That's really apparent here when we look at the overall pitch usage. He's thrown 7 sliders in his 3 starts and 27 curveballs. So if you're going up to the plate as a big league hitter, you're really only looking for the fastball or the changeup. That's it. Like, you're gonna eliminate these two pitches because he barely uses them. So you're going up there just waiting for the fastball, basically, as a big league hitter, is their approach at the moment, because you don't have to worry about these two pitches. So he's really pitching at the big league level as a starting pitcher with just 2 pitches, which obviously is not a recipe for success. The reason that Jonah Tong probably uses his fastball so much is because of the movement profile. He is one of 10 pitchers or less in the big leagues who carries on average 20 inches on his fastball. That is elite. So he has an elite fastball with the velo to go with it. So I understand why he's kind of fallen in love with that fastball and why it was probably so effective in the minor leagues. Changeup that he throws as his second pitch is not considered elite. So elite in the big leagues is 15 arm side movement or horizontal break, whatever you want to call it, is 15 plus. So he's a little below that, and the vertical break on his pitch is actually on the higher end at 8.8. So that secondary pitch that he has is not considered elite. So his fastball's elite, and then his changeup is not. And that's his second pitch. The slider's decent. He's trying to throw a gyro slider here. It can use some work, but again, this is a super small sample size. He's only thrown 7 of them, so these metrics aren't completely accurate. The thing that I don't understand why he's not, this curveball's good. This is a very good curveball. Negative 16 on vertical break on a curveball is very good. So I don't know why that pitch isn't being used more. That's the first pitch that I would introduce more often, especially to left-handed hitters. He's a guy who's going to play the strike zone of throwing fastballs at the top and then throwing curveballs at the bottom. I don't know why that isn't something that he's doing more often and why he's relying so heavily on the fastball and the changeup at the moment. But again, this is a small sample size. He's only had 3 starts, and as I said, he's 22 years old. He's super young to be in the big leagues. Another thing to look at here is when he is giving up hits. This is obviously his first outing where he did very well. When we start to look at it, he's really just missing in the crosshairs of the strike zone. He's just missing down the middle. This is a 1-2 count. That's obviously not where we want to put the baseball. Against the Reds, gives us a home run here on how he should use his fastball. He should pitch at the top of the zone, and obviously he got clipped here by McLean, the 9 hitter, right? So you're not really thinking that this guy's going to take you deep. He's the 9 hitter in the lineup, but that's what happens here. He leaves a fastball two over the plate, and it gets hit for a home run. So that was a little bit unlucky. That is how he should use his fastball. But again, he's just using it at too high of a clip at 56%. And that's the biggest problem here with his pitches. And then obviously he struggled in his last outing. This is the last batter he faced and was, gave up 4 runs in the first inning. Well, he gave up 5 runs in the first inning. This was a little bit of fatigue. Obviously throwing 40 pitches in an outing is a ton in the first inning. He just kept falling behind in counts and kept, as I said, relying on that fastball. It's just as a 3-2 fastball, big league hitters are going to make you pay for that. So that's really what's going on here. So that's really what Jonah Tong needs to fix. He needs to fix making sure we're looking at home plate at release. He's really pulling that head off, which could lead to some arm issues for him. The things that he does exceptionally well is that spinal extension is absolutely elite. His extension overall when he's throwing his pitches is elite. But he's running into issues with his pitch mix in general. Just being a 2-pitch pitcher is just not going to be effective at the big league level, especially when he does have a very good curveball that he's not using, and he could absolutely use it against lefties. He needs to change his usage up and not rely so heavily on the fastball. As I said earlier, the fastball is an elite fastball for sure, but he needs to use it effectively. Right now, it's at a too high percentage of a clip, and hitters are just sitting on it, and that's been clear in his past 2 outings. He's a young pitcher. He's 22 years old. He's going to figure it out eventually. Just right now, he needs to fix that mechanical issue, his pitch usage, and he'll be just fine.